Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. And, Jim, we have a double-barreled good martini, both of which ought to get that little smirk on the face of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, because we know how effusive he is with his emotions. But it's been a pretty good couple of days for him here. Let's start with the first piece of good news. This is from Bloomberg. The Senate reached a deal Tuesday to swiftly confirm 7 federal district court judges, helping President Donald Trump put an enduring stamp on the U.S. judiciary. The latest confirmations mean Trump, with the help of the Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, has already confirmed 60 judges to the court, including 33 district court judges, 26 appeals court judges, and Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. 8 more, though, of Trump's district court nominees are set for confirmation next week. And all of this leads up, of course, to the Kavanaugh Supreme Court confirmation hearing. So, Jim, we know there are dozens and dozens of vacancies on the district and appellate courts, and so there's still a long way to go, hopefully still in this Congress, while we know for sure the Republicans have the majority. But people were wondering, especially in the first couple days of this shortened recess and coming back in the middle of August when some Republicans didn't even bother to show up, whether this would accomplish anything. And so far, at least on the judicial front, it looks like it has.
You ever watch, a trade between two teams? And no, this is not my way of segueing to the Jets trading away Teddy Bridgewater. And you see both fan bases kind of griping about it, and both sides are convinced that they got the short end of the stick. I did see some conservatives saying that because Trump agreed to renominate Mark Gaston Pierce for another term on the National Labor Relations Board, if you follow labor issues, this guy is Darth Vader on the right. This guy is as bad as they come from the perspective of Republicans and conservatives who really focus on that, the business community, folks like that. Look, this keeps, a GOP majority on the National Labor Relations Board. And in exchange, they're getting a whole bunch of, court justices and that are there for the lifetime. It's been really fascinating to watch, the Republicans some Republicans, or at least labor-focused Republicans, grumbling about it. Whereas a whole bunch of Democrats, including the former Obama administration officials, the Brian Fallons of the world, are like, no, we just gave away the store. What are you talking about? This is the Herschel Walker trade. As far as they're concerned, a whole bunch of judges, 7 federal district court judges who effectively have, lifetime appointments, in exchange for one guy on the National Labor Relations Board, strikes them as a terrible deal. I think all in all, this is a very good move. I see Brian Fallon is now calling it, McConnell is in the middle of stealing the federal courts for conservatives. Is it stealing when the Senate votes to confirm them, Greg? I don't think that. Yeah. But it's worth noting, he says, Democrats continue to bring a butter knife to a gunfight. Think of a more pathetic surrender heading into the Kavanaugh hearings. I don't know if McConnell wants to run for another term, Greg, but if he does, that's really the sort of thing you'd want to put in the ads, wouldn't it?
Jim, if confirming people is somehow an aberration of the system, then the Republicans should be getting no grief over what happened to Merrick Garland. They were somehow defending the system, I guess, if that's what the Democratic beef is.
It's one of those things where, look, when you guys follow the Constitution, it's an egregious outrage. When we follow the Constitution, we're just upholding the finest of American traditions, yada, yada, yada.
Exactly. All right, let's move to part 2 of our good martini, and this brings us to West Virginia and Don Blankenship. You remember Don Blankenship, right?
I will beat Joe Manchin and ditch Cocaine Mitch for the sake of the kids.
Now, yeah, the coal baron who spent prison time because his mines were not safe, and that led to a number of deaths a few years back there in West Virginia. He lost badly, distant third place in the West Virginia Senate primary back in May. And now he will not be on the ballot come November despite his best efforts. Politico, the West Virginia Supreme Court denied former coal company executive Don Blankenship's bid to get on the ballot this November as a Constitution Party candidate after he lost the Republican primary earlier this year. Blankenship's effort could have shaken up the battleground race between Democratic Senator Joe Manchin and State Attorney General Patrick Morrisey, the Republican nominee, siphoning critical votes from Morrisey as he seeks to oust the incumbent. But West Virginia has a sore loser law preventing major party primary losers from running on another ticket in November. Because of that, Republicans expressed little concern throughout the summer that Blankenship's efforts to make the ballot would be successful, and the state Supreme Court shot down Blankenship's appeal after the Secretary of State denied his petition to be listed on the general election ballot. Quote, the West Virginia Secretary of State is ordered to take whatever measures are necessary to ensure that Donald L. Blankenship does not appear on the 2018 general election ballot for the office of United States Senator for the state of West Virginia. Blankenship is very upset. He calls this a frightening decision. In a statement, he says, essentially, the Republican Party, no, I need to do this Blankenship style. Essentially, the Republican Party can now slander a candidate throughout the primary, effectively denying that candidate an equal opportunity to win the nomination and simultaneously pass a law in the middle of an election cycle which prohibits the slandered person from being on the general election ballot. Jim, he's upset that he got attacked during the primary, and somehow that's unfair when he lost. So good luck, Don.
I mean, first of all, I believe that sore loser laws are generally a good idea. I think you should basically, you want to run as an independent, run as an independent. You want to run as a party candidate, run as a party candidate. But pick one. You don't get to keep taking bites at the apple after you lose a particular race. You lose a primary, sorry, you're out for this cycle. Get ready for the next one. So, as we've seen, many folks go, oh, if I run, I'll split the vote, and this way I can really stick it to the guy who had the shameless audacity to win more votes than I did in the primary. But I'm just going to observe. I mean, look, you read. I think your dramatic performance as a Blankenship was excellent, Greg. I do have in my hand a little distributed statement from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's office. It's really striking. I will attempt to do the interpretation of this statement in the terms of McConnell saying them. That's history. I'm here. He's not. You want to go on with me? You say it. You don't, then you make a move. In this country, you got to make the money first. Then when you get the money, you get the power. Then when you get the power, you get the women. I destroy all these cockroaches. No, actually, I'm sorry. That's from Tony Montana in Scarface. I'm sorry. I had the wrong Cocaine Mitch. Greg, is Cocaine Mitch like the best thing to come out of this cycle so far?
I think it has to be.
Right? I mean, the idea of Mitch McConnell as this vicious, ruthless drug lord, coked out of his mind, and introducing everyone to his little friend, on the one, it's hilarious because it's so not Mitch McConnell's personality. But also, I mean, as we were discussing in the deal over the nominations, McConnell is a pretty shrewd operator, and as much as he's not a whirling dervish of raw political charisma. He's not a table pounder. He's not the kind of guy you're going to see on Fox News a lot, whipping everybody up into a frenzy. He can give decent speeches, but generally this is a soft-spoken guy who knows how to negotiate, who knows every lever of power, every bit of influence and leverage in the Senate, and he uses it very effectively. So kudos, Senate Majority Leader. We want to stay on your good side because, we've all seen what happens when somebody messes with him.
Terrorist strikes again in London.
Putin's nuclear ambitions are raising proliferation questions.
There's a new military strategy in the South China Sea.
Global events happening now mean the demand for national security professionals will spike over the next decade. America's security will depend on individuals highly trained in strategy, disruption management, and decision-making. The Daniel Morgan Graduate School of National Security prepares students for a world full of instability. Students in our state-of-the-art school, just 3 blocks from the White House, take courses in counterterrorism, U.S. nuclear weapons, Russian politics, and statecraft. Our graduates are well prepared for sought-after security positions in government and private sectors. Even more unique are the multi-full-ride scholarships provided by donors investing in future leaders. For more information, go to dmgs.org/radio. For a career in organizations like Marriott and Boeing, the CIA, or FBI, and a possible full-ride scholarship, go immediately to dmgs.org/radio. That's dmgs.org/radio.
All right, Jim, let's move on to our bad martini now. And this is just horrific and maddening on so many different levels. First of all, that the media doesn't care about the story. And now what's happening in the judicial process. Fox News has the story. Lots of other places have this story as well. 3 suspects tied to a New Mexico compound where alleged Muslim extremists reportedly trained children to be school shooters were released from custody on Wednesday, hours after a judge dismissed all of the charges against them, Fox News confirmed. District Judge Emilio Chavez on Wednesday dismissed charges against 3 of the 5 defendants, Lucas Morton, Subhana Wahaj, and Hujra Wahaj, ruling that authorities violated the state's 10-day rule. Child abuse charges against them were dropped because prosecutors missed the 10-day limit for an evidentiary hearing to establish probable cause. During a separate hearing Wednesday, Judge Jeff McElroy dismissed the same charges against fellow defendants Siraj Wahaj and Johnny Lavelle. However, charges leveled against them on Friday in connection to the death of a missing 3-year-old boy remained. The 5 suspects were arrested by authorities after an August 3rd raid following a months-long search investigating the disappearance of Abdul Ghani Wahaj, a 3-year-old boy with severe medical issues who went missing from Georgia in December. So, Jim, as a result of this story over the past few weeks, we've determined that the media doesn't care about planning to do school shootings if the political narrative isn't what they want it to be. Then we had the judge releasing people on bond before they even face the charges. Now we've got prosecutors too incompetent to even follow the rules, and so these people go free. We know that they can be re-indicted, but this is just maddening.
You really want to ask the prosecutors, when you did not, file the charges by the deadline, were you busy? was there something else going on that wild crazy bender over the weekend, or really excited about preseason football? No, that's not true. Nobody ever gets excited about preseason football. This isn't quite one of those you had one job type circumstances, because you do have multiple, but first of all, it's a 10-day limit, right? If it's some sort of ludicrously short limit for this important paperwork, but establishing probable cause strikes me as a really important part here. This has to be the biggest case of their lives. How do you forget that? How do you overlook that? This is, just kind of hard to imagine here. The only other thing, this is such sheer incompetence. It's the sort of thing of how conspiracy theories get started. I mean, was this the sort of thing where you want to release them because you want to see who they call, who they contact, who they have other associates, et cetera, et cetera? I suppose that could happen. But you can't do that after you've held the press conference and the Today Show has just done this giant feature on what was going on at this compound and the danger it presented and all of that. Really baffling decision-making here, in which I guess wild incompetence is the best explanation, Craig, right? That's the goods one. Is the worst one that they're somehow in on it or something? You were left in a state of just utter disbelief that a crime that has already killed one child and appeared to be, planning a scale of attacks we have not seen in this country and that we've feared ever since Beslan in Russia could be bobbled by sheer prosecutorial incompetence.
Absolutely ridiculous. I hope these people are up for re-election. At least the head DA in that county is up for re-election in this fall, because he ought to be sent packing, no doubt. All right, Jim, let's move on to our crazy martini now. And for today's craziness, we turn to Clinton-era Labor Secretary Robert Reich. He is a columnist for Newsweek. I believe he still teaches out at Berkeley. He writes this column for Newsweek explaining why he doesn't think Trump will ever actually leave office through impeachment, thinks it might not even happen, that he'll lose in 2020. He thinks he should be impeached, but obviously the numbers won't be there in the Senate, most likely, to convict. But he says even if you do impeach him and convict him, it still isn't enough. He says, just suppose, Robert Mueller finds overwhelming and indisputable evidence that Trump conspired with Russian President Vladimir Putin to rig the 2016 election, and the rigging determined the election's outcome. In other words, Trump's presidency is not authorized under the United States Constitution. Impeachment would not remedy Trump's unconstitutional presidency because it would leave in place his vice president, White House staff, and cabinet, as well as all the executive orders he issued and all the legislation he signed and the official record of his presidency. The only response to an unconstitutional presidency is to annul it. Annulment would repeal all of an unconstitutional president's appointments and executive actions and would eliminate the official record of his presidency. Jim, this is not like getting an annulment after a drunken Vegas wedding here. This is the way the constitutional process works. He goes on to once again say at the very end, I really don't think this is going to happen. I'm just saying. This is absurd.
Yeah, the shorter version is, look, readers, I don't think this is going to happen, but I need the attention, and Newsweek.com needs the traffic. So this is why this article is being written. And may I never reach that point where you put something out outrageous just to get the attention. The first thing we want to put to Robert Reich is, who do you think should be president then? My assumption, mostly, if you load him up with the truth serum, he'd say Hillary. And never mind the fact that she did not win enough votes in enough states to win the Electoral College, and in fact lost it by a fairly sizable margin. I'm always very wary whenever anybody's perception of true justice just happens to come out with the outcome that they always wanted all along. It says to me your perception of what is noble and just and right just happens to be what you think was, the outcome that was most advantageous for you. So because this is my other thought, I'm extraordinarily wary of impeachment short of indisputable, ironclad, smoking gun evidence. But my suspicion is that this is not merely, Trump is terrible, he's got to go, he's committed high crimes and misdemeanors. My suspicion is that ultimately this is 2016 is a historical accident and we must undo it. And, the more people say, oh, no, Pence has got to go too. Pence is complicit in all this. I don't think Pence was sending any money to Stormy Daniels. I don't think Pence has any suspicious ties to anyone from real estate deals or anything like that. Mike Pence is clean as a whistle. Mike Pence doesn't have lunch with women who aren't his wife without witnesses present or something like that. Remember he was this, we bring us back to Handmaid's Tale and all that stuff. But no, he's every bit as bad, so he's got to go. So my suspicion is that, if Paul Ryan wasn't retiring, Greg, I don't know about you, I'd be perfectly happy with, President Paul Ryan. Put a lot of effort into that in 2012. But no, we can't have that. Basically, what these people are saying is that we want Democrats to be in charge of the government. And just because we lost the election of 2016 doesn't mean we're willing to accept that. And now we are trying to figure out what steps do we have to take to undo the election, undo the Supreme Court justices, undo the judicial appointments, undo the budget passed, the tax cuts passed, every piece of legislation. They literally want to turn back the clock and undo time. Folks, we've been seeing for years exactly what you need to do if history has gone wrong and you're trying to prevent some horrible outcome. You know what that is, Greg?
Get a DeLorean?
Correct. Buy a time machine, send back either a Terminator or an 80s kid or somebody like that, John Connor, Kyle Reese, go back there and actually alter time because that does less constitutional damage than the ideas being tossed around right now.
Wow. Big week, though, for the Clinton alumni. Donna Shalala, at 77 years old, after being a cabinet secretary and a university president in multiple locations for some reason, wants to be in the House of Representatives and actually won the primary in the Florida district that Ileana Ros-Lehtinen is leaving.
Greg, I'm just glad they're finally finding some fresh faces.
That's right. She's 77. She's perfectly teed up to go in 2020. Absolutely.
As Nancy Pelosi calls it, it's a youth movement. The other thing we should keep in mind, do you realize that Rush Limbaugh can reuse didn't he have he had a Donna Shalala song back in the early to mid 90s because she was HHS secretary during Hillary Care.
Yeah.
That's why you listen to this podcast, folks. I remember stuff from the early 90s that nobody else does. But I want to say it was to Layla, the Eric Clapton song. It was Shalala or something like that. Rush Limbaugh is probably hey, yeah, go elect her. I can reuse this stuff. So.
Everything old is new again. Jim, have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. And be sure to tune in again on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.